The final chapter of the Age of War is coming to Conan Exiles, and earlier today we had the Funcom dev stream to go through all the juicy details. There is quite a bit to cover, so without further ado, let's get started with the new event. The Sacred Hunt event is the main piece of content in the Age of War Chapter 4. It's an event that will run the duration of the chapter, but the devs did describe it as evergreen content, in that it can run again in the future whenever they want it to, so the rewards and gameplay content won't be gone forever once the event is over. The Sacred Hunt is tied to Jebel Sag. His champions are fighting for dominance to earn their god's favour, and of course power knows no bounds, so the hunt is open to all, including us. We'll be able to fight Jebel Sag's champions and earn event-exclusive rewards through this event. Some of the rewards will include a new throne, statues, cloaks, weapons, etc, so some pretty nice stuff. The basic premise is simple. It starts with were-hyena ambushes at night, where you'll fight level-scaled enemies and be able to loot things from them, namely a flesh map and some fangs, this event's special currency. The flesh map will point you to a new Jebel Sag shrine in the world, further signified by a skybeam, which is the event hub. Here you'll be able to opt in or out of the event, spend fangs on special rewards, and hunt down the champions, the main bosses of this event. The champions are all animal bosses, and they come with an interesting twist. To properly progress the Sacred Hunt, you must defeat them in the spirit of Jebel Sag, and thus you'll have to be without armour, covered in the god's war paint. This gives you a significant damage boost against the champions, which you'll need as they have a lot of health. The Event Hub NPC says there are currently 3 champions in game, and to progress the event you will have to find their altar, leave a champion's lure to draw them in, fight them, and as you defeat each of them in the spirit of Jebel Sag, they will give you more fangs and a unique brand from their flesh. You'll be able to use these brands to craft a Grand Champion lure, and then buy a potion of the hunt from the hub, which teleports you to the boss arena, where you'll be able to fight a new giant, what seems like a bear, as the final boss at this event. All of this is replayable and farmable for the fangs, and the event will give you different items and recipes through the event vendor, and all those recipes do stay with your character after the event ends. The devs also hinted at a new NPC in the tavern, though left it for others to discover. I'm already working on a full breakdown of the Sacred Hunt event, so I'll be covering all the spoilers, rewards, and fine details in a video coming this Sunday. From what they've shown of this event, the Sacred Hunt seems pretty fun. It brings in a god you don't really see much of, balances combat and map exploration quite well, and the rewards are good too. The fact this event is touted as evergreen and can come back at any time is, I think, a good omen for the future. Stuff like witch hunts in Sorcery Chapter 2 were okay, but they only really ran for that chapter and were fairly limited in scope. This event seems a lot more broad and interesting with engaging mechanics, and if they add new rewards to that loot pool in future iterations of the event, I think Sacred Hunt could be quite good, not only for the Age of War Chapter 4, but also for events in general in the future. Another new feature is the updates to the Purge, and if I may humble brag for just a second, I called this. The Purge gets some new waves this update, and the Stygians are perhaps more terrifying now than they've ever been before. Firstly, the Meteor Mage. These guys appear at tier 9 Purges and above. They'll just spawn in, head on over to the sorcery site in their camp, and rain down meteors on your base. When I mentioned the Meteor Mage in a previous video, I thought it'd be just one large meteor at a time, but no, it's a full-on meteor storm. To stop it from pelting your base, you have to kill the mage. You could kill him before he starts casting if you're vigilant, but if you're caught off guard, you'll either have to snipe him or push out of your base to stop the meteors. The meteors will do damage to your base, but some of them will also be harvestable if you survive the Purge, so there is a good balance of risk and reward there. Another new wave are the Thieves, appearing at and above tier 6. I suggested in a previous video they might be able to climb walls or sneak into your base, and whilst they can't climb, they are indeed very sneaky. These guys are invisible, the same invisibility as the player can cast through sorcery, and they will attempt to sneak through your base, unlock the doors, and just get away with your treasure right under your nose. It seems they're designed to keep you paranoid during the Purge, and maybe it's a little masochistic, but I like the sound of it. The Purge has split its priority across different enemies quite well already, but presuming Thieves will take the place of, say, Demolishers, if you don't see anyone on the field carrying a battering ram, then the paranoia factor is going to skyrocket. Thieves do sound pretty slow, They do have to crouch in front of doors for a while to lockpick them, and of course if you find a random door open, then it's a sign a thief might be about. You can track them through sound and kind of see them partially through their invisibility as you can with a player, but in general the thieves sound really cool. They might be a bit strong given their invisibility, but we'll have to give them a try and see how they work out. The third new wave are champions, who are apparently a beefier version of regular enemies, and they move in formation with an entourage of other enemies. Finally, golems, also appearing at or above tier 6. I also called this one, and it sounds like they'll be quite simple, a mix of explosive and regular golems. If you've got star metal weapons, then you'll have no issue getting rid of them, but the explosive head golems might require a bit more planning so you don't accidentally blow a gaping hole in your base. Additionally, there is a new defensive tool. It's half for the Purge and half for PvP, so I'll cover it here. We finally have a ballista, and it's a big boy. You build it on a siege platform, load it with bolts or balls, and it's ready to go. You'll be able to craft ammunition in stone, iron, and star metal, and these tools are designed to fight off the Purge and enemy avatars in PvP. They're not able to be used by thralls yet, nor are trebuchets, but that may come in the future. The ballista can be primed, charged, and fired to varying degrees with notches on the firing track to prevent it from returning to 0%. To fully charge it, it takes about 8 seconds, and a full charge will increase range and damage. Bolts will strike and knock down enemies in a line, sort of like a collateral-based unit killer, and the balls are designed for sieges, doing good point-based damage against enemy building pieces, which should be useful for both PvP and the siege on Al Mariah and some of the new camps on Siptar. The ammunition does have pretty harsh drop-off and travel time when fired, and the sound effects are chunky. As for PvP balance, you require 2 successful hits with star metal bolts to kill an avatar. The ballista is meant to be an avatar killer, but seeing as I know nothing about PvP, I'm not going to try and comment on how that balancing sounds or plays out. That's something for people that play PvP and fight avatars regularly. I've wanted a ballista in the game for a long time, and purely on the PvE front, I think it'll be a very powerful tool, especially when the Purge does finally get access to the set avatar in the future. Overall, the Purge changes look great. Again, I did call a lot of them. They've been in the admin panel for a while, but honestly they've all turned out a lot cooler than I first expected. I am very excited to get rained on by the Meteor Mage, snuck upon by thieves, and blown up by golems. Fatalities are finally in game, and they seem quite good, and importantly, they're not overcomplicated. When you're fighting an enemy, there is a random chance that dealing fatal damage to their enemy will render them staggered. If you then attack them again whilst they're staggered, you'll enter into the Fatality animation, which is pretty speedy. There's different executions for different weapon classes, but they're all fast, efficient, and brutal. You do have invulnerability frames whilst executing, but none afterwards, so if you execute in a bad spot surrounded by enemies, you're gonna get punished. Also, you cannot currently execute players. I was hoping Fatalities would be executed, no pun intended, through an additional button press and not just swinging your weapon again, as it does sound like you could end up accidentally finishing off an opponent you didn't want to. However, it seems the opportunity for accidents like that is quite slim. Enemies will stagger and be fatalityable, but if you don't execute them, they drop down dead within a couple of seconds. Your window to execute the fatality is quite short, but comparatively the window for accidental fatalities is also quite short. When you perform a fatality, you'll receive the fatality buff. It will heal you a bit, give you a bit of a stamina refund, and increases damage slightly for a while. Overall, there isn't a ton of nuance to this system, and there doesn't need to be. It's simple, brutal, I like what they've done with it. It adds a nice bit of flavour to combat. On that topic, there are some brief combat changes too. I detailed these in a Chapter 4 preview video a while ago, but I'll briefly cover them here too. Basically, you can now toggle combat to how it used to be prior to the Age of War Chapter 3. In particular, you can now rotate attacks again by just moving your camera. If, like me, you preferred how combat was in the Age of War Chapter 2, then you can now toggle back to that in the options, or stay with the method introduced in Chapter 3. They've also toned down enemy rotation on all the biggest offenders. Not every single enemy in-game has been redone just yet, but the enemies that were reported as being the worst for just perfectly tracking you will now chill out a bit and not be so glued to you. Admittedly, I'm not much of a combat person, you already know this, but even I could feel how bad combat felt in Chapter 3, so being able to return back to how combat was in Chapter 2 will be a welcome improvement. Finally, some of the smaller changes to combat. Firstly, rolling thrust has had the stamina bonus removed, and the stamina regeneration in general has been changed so that stamina does not begin restoring in 0.1 seconds, but instead in 1 full second. This was targeted specifically at reducing roll spam. You can still roll a lot, but when your stamina is empty you will have to wait at least that full second to start regaining stamina, very much a change for the PvP crowd. There's also some UI changes which seem pretty good. Firstly, followers have had their UI options streamlined and now have thrall behaviour modifiers in their inventory screen panel, so you can adjust them easily and more precisely with sliders rather than spending minutes buried in the radial menu. You can change all sorts of behaviour here, you can even have them run away from danger if you want. Thralls do have some sort of memory, so they remember their instructions between follow and stay modes, and there's also some minor language changes to make things a bit more clear in terms of what you can expect your thrall to do based on the options given. The radial menu has also been made a bit faster and easier to navigate, and they've added a directional input reader to make things clear and easy. Finally, some improvements have also been made to the inventory UI. Item filters will now appear at the top based on the categories of items you're holding, and you can also search through type filters, which have been adjusted to better organise the items and remember the sorting they were in. There are now options to right-click an item stack to quickly split it in half, and there's now a quick stack option to transfer items quickly from your inventory into existing stacks in chests, which is very good. I love that function, though in the beta build you cannot precisely split stacks anymore. I'm not sure if that's intentional or otherwise, hopefully that functionality is retained. The weight bar at the top of the inventory also has a more precise encumbrance indicator and an overweight percentage too. Over on the crafting side of things, materials and item descriptions have been simplified to make things easier to understand, and the crafting requirements have also been made clearer. Items in the crafting interface also show their stats when clicked, such as armor value or weapon damage. It doesn't show any special stats on there yet, though that could change in the future. The UI improvements are not groundbreaking, but I do think they make the process of interacting with the game a bit easier. I wouldn't have said it was absolutely terrible before. I've played games with terrible UI, but any improvement is always good. I'm a big fan of quickly stacking into chests. That's a feature I use in any game that has it, so I'm very happy to see it here. Finally, on the gameplay front, there's some big changes to the Battle Pass. Basically, daily challenges are gone, replaced instead with a fairly simple system where anything you do in-game that earns XP will also earn you Battle Pass XP too. Daily challenges are replaced by weekly challenges. There are 3 challenges every week, and each challenge completed will give you 2.5 Battle Pass tiers, so even if you only do the weeklies and basically don't play the game at all, you're guaranteed 7.5 tiers per week. In 8 weeks you'll have reached tier 60 on the Battle Pass, so there's a good amount of wiggle room even if you only do the weeklies. That being said, if you don't want to do the challenges, you can still earn Battle Pass XP by just playing the game however you wish. Weekly challenges have also been upgraded a bit. It doesn't include stuff like harvest rocks or skin animals anymore. They encourage you to get out in the world and explore a bit, so the weeklies won't just be mundane tasks you'll finish in a minute or two. Myself and many others use the Blitz method for the Battle Pass currently, where you save your bonuses and just use admin mode in single player to rinse through them as fast as possible. I'm not too sure how these changes will affect that method. The devs did mention doing a full Q&A blog in roughly a week, so I presume we'll get some more answers there. The new changes sound pretty good on paper, and if they shake out well, they will be a big improvement to the Battle Pass. On the microtransactions front, firstly, the Battle Pass itself is themed around the Zingaran culture, so you can expect a nice bit of Spanish influence in this Battle Pass. There's of course new armour sets, weapons, placeables, emotes, emblems, and even a building set in the Battle Pass too, which seems similar to the initial Aesir fortification walls. There seems to be some good stuff in this Battle Pass, though we didn't get a really in-depth look at everything, so we'll have to wait until it's out on the live servers to get properly acquainted with everything here. On the Bazaar front, we've got a Yamatai Onsen bundle based around a Japanese spa, the Poitain Jousting bundle, another expansion to the Lost Dungeon set, and more. Of course we didn't see everything, but some of the new stuff does look quite nice. I will say, I am definitely suffering from some dungeon fatigue. I was hoping for something other than a third expansion, but in all honesty, I imagine it was the easiest choice given that Chapter 4 was not initially planned for. The dungeon expansion adds crenellations, better rounded elements, placeable cobwebs, spider elements, and even sewer tunnel sections, which is quite unique and, admittedly, very cool. I also noticed in the Bazaar that there's some returning elements from the early Age of Sorcery battle passes, like the arcane building pieces and a demon bundle, which at a glance looked like a reskin of the Fiend set. They did mention all the way back in Age of Sorcery Chapter 1 that they would like to bring some of the more desirable rewards from battle passes into the Bazaar in the future, and it seems they are finally doing that. They also showed some Stygian decorations, including a new chair and a sarcophagus you can open, stand in and close the lid, though it wasn't clear if they're from the Bazaar or the Battle Pass. Overall, there's some fairly nice looking things. I think the Battle Pass is probably going to be quite unique and add a lot of flavour with that Zingaran culture. And as for the stuff in the Bazaar, we didn't get too good of a look at it, so we'll have to wait until they're in game. The dungeon expansion, kind of mixed on it still, but the tunnel pieces look very interesting at least. Of course, as with every update, there's a wealth of bug fixes, adjustments, and quality of life improvements. Most of the quality of life features are encompassed in the inventory overhaul, though there is one other quality of life change that moves the dying functionality from the inventory to the dyer's bench. This seems pretty simple from what I've tried out. You just take your armour, put it into a new slot in the dyer's bench, and then you will open the same interface you saw before, with obviously the relevant dye slots for the armour piece selected and the gender of your character. There are quite a lot of bug fixes in the patch notes, too many to detail here, but I will highlight a few of the notable ones. Fixed a single player crash around the Black Galleon for low spec PCs. Fixed an issue preventing hatch frames from being placed next to wedge ceilings. Siege foundations now follow better overlapping rules and can't be placed halfway into buildings. Fixed an issue where some epic weapons did not trigger the epic weapon crafting step in the Warsmith journey. Every piece of the champion's armour can now be dyed. Stormglass pieces no longer let the rain through. The Sword of Crom now properly deals damage to all enemy types even when held by thralls. Certain avatars on Xbox are no longer invisible, and there are plenty of other fixes. Again, too many to mention, but the patch notes are in the description below, so I encourage you to take a moment to read them for yourself to see all the bug fixes and to see the notable issues that are currently in the beta build that they know of and either are working on a fix for or have a fix ready for. Dennis also mentioned that a change has been made to the dialogue system to make it a bit cleaner and easier to work with. NPCs now have multiple dialogue paths and options, so you don't just have to listen to every single line of dialogue if you want to talk about something specific. Also, another smaller addition that I forgot to mention earlier, the devs have added some small destructible camps to the Isle of Siptar, one at Ixotal, I've probably just butchered the pronunciation, and the other at New Luxor. The enemies in these camps do not respawn until the base resets, and the base will reset on a timer if nobody is nearby as long as the boss has been defeated. This is basically a smaller version of the Almeria siege system of destructible enemy camps, though because they are smaller, they do perform a lot better. Whilst the raid itself has not been ported over, this does offer some new content with this system on Siptar. So finally, when does the Age of War Chapter 4 release? Well, the beta itself is actually already out. It dropped on the 7th of May. This stream was just delayed by a day. As for the full release, it's currently slated for April 2nd on all platforms, assuming nothing game-breaking comes up of course. I'll be covering the beta and the full release on my channel, diving deep into all the new additions, the lore, the building sets and everything else, so if you want to see all the coverage of the Age of War Chapter 4 and whatever lays in the future of Conan Exiles, make sure to subscribe. If you've been following for a while and you enjoy the content, do consider checking out the Patreon too. If you join us, not only do you support the channel, you'll also get custom wallpapers, video credits, Discord roles, and early access to videos before anyone else too. Anyway, that about wraps us up for today. There's quite a bit more in this update than I expected considering it was not planned for, and I gotta say I'm pretty pleasantly surprised by pretty much all of it. Thank you for watching, and of course a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. Let me know what you think of this update in the comments below. I am very intrigued to dive into the lore surrounding Jebel Sarg and the Sacred Hunt, and to get my hands on the new Purge waves too. I'm excited to give them a go and see how difficult they are. Again, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.